Hello and happy Monday. We are going through chapter 6 in our book today. This is on retouching, so we're going to learn a lot of the retouching tools and how each one has a strength and a weakness, and sometimes you have to use more than one of them. And we're actually going to start with a gradient. We're going to learn how to make gradients. In the old days, if you will, when they did product photography and they wanted to place it on a neutral background, sometimes they would need to airbrush, like literally with, inks and airbrushes, a gradient background that they would then set their products on. So that's kind of why we're starting with the gradient tool in this chapter. Otherwise, it seems a little bizarre why we start with that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new document of any size. We're just going to experiment with the gradient tool. And I am going to choose probably just the 7x5 at 300. That's a recent shape size of an artboard that we've used in the past. So we'll start there. And I'm going to close this info panel for now. That was open because I can see that my last tool used was the color sampler from last week. So I'm just going to switch to the move tool. If ever you're using a tool that's kind of bothersome, and the crop tool will put crop lines on there for you, and that can be annoying. So the move tool is always a safe one. So we're going to go to the gradient tool. And the gradient tool is over here on your toolbar. And if we click and hover down, we see that the shortcut for it is letter G, and nested with it are the paint bucket and the 3D material drop tool. Make sure that you're in the gradient tool. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to select our two colors to make a gradient. You can see that my two color chips happen to be a tan and a dark brown from my last use. And therefore a gradient that is showing up here is using those two color chips. So I would like you to click on the foreground color and find some color that you would like to use as your foreground color, and then choose a background color. Try to do something kind of extreme. So I chose blue and yellow. You can choose whatever you would like. Then when we come up to our option bar, again, this is specific to whatever tool you are in at the time. So our first option is just some recently used or favorites, so we don't really have anything there. Whoops. Undo. I happened to click, I guess. The next one over is our different gradients. And this dialog box has changed a little. I'm going to try to open it up here a little bit. So in this drop down, we have basics, and then we have a bunch of different colors. We also have some cloudy gradients, which is kind of interesting, iridescent, pre-made, some pastels, and neutrals. So if we twirl open the basics, if we hover over them, we're going to see a tooltip, I would like to think. Foreground to background. So this is not really a blue and yellow chip. It's whatever your foreground is and whatever your background is. So if you set up different colors, yours will look different. So the first option is foreground to background. The second option is foreground to transparent, so blue into completely transparent. And then the default is a black to a white, or something that's fairly universal. So let's just pick the version that is foreground to background. And then we need to look at some of these other options up here. The first is the default, which is a linear gradient. So let's just practice with this. And as you click and draw a line, your gradient will be spread from left to right over that line. So if I let go, I stopped at about this point. So the gradient went to blue to yellow there, and then it just finished with all yellow. So if you want to go from blue to yellow over the course of your whole distance, you need to spread out your gradient line a little bit longer. If you want to go up and down, you change the direction. If you want to go up and down but make sure you're being held straight, remember you can hold the Shift key. And notice that each time I'm doing this, I am getting a new result that's covering up my previous result, and that's the expected behavior. Each time you click, it's a new version replacing the previous one. And that's the case for a few of these first tools. The next one, if we look in our option bar, is a radial gradient. And when we click on that, it's going to go out in a circle form. So again, I only went a few inches here. So it went from blue to yellow over the course of that line, and then it was yellow from then on. So you can spread this out. You can do all sorts of things. If you wanted the yellow on the inside, you would just flip your colors here at the bottom of the toolbar, click on the double arrow to flip them. And now we have a yellow to blue radial gradient. Looks like a sun in the sky. The next version is the angle. This one's kind of weird. And to see how it's going to work, you probably just want to draw some lines. So I just did a diagonal line. Here's a horizontal line. So we can see that above the line and below the line, we have our blue and yellow, and the part that's kind of bending around it in a U shape is our gradient. It's going from blue to yellow all the way to full yellow. So this is one that I don't know that it gets used a lot, but it's interesting. It's a nice way to just split your screen in two. All right, the next one is reflected. And again, we're just going to test drive this. And this one is also replacing each time you draw. These do have some degree of transparency built into them, so you may at times see remnants of the line you just drew. I'm not finding that with the color combination that I chose, but you may have that happening. So those are like some 80s school picture backgrounds, which probably only one or two of you are familiar with. Dating myself again. All right, the last one is diamond, and that's how that bad boy works. Kind of as expected. All of these do have blend modes, and we've worked with those a little bit. Normal is always the default, but these different blend modes change the way it interacts with other layers. So I did a lighten, and instead of getting yellow, we're getting white, and also notice that I'm adding to this. Now this really looks like an 80s background. We also have opacity sliders, so we can change the opacity. I'm down to 19% now doing some of these diamonds. The others were done with 100% opacity. And basically you can just play around with this and experiment to your heart's content to figure out what's going on here. So that is the gradient tool. But you perhaps want to make your own custom gradient rather than just allowing it to be two colors, either foreground to background or foreground to transparent. So I'm going to start by reverting back. There's a variety of ways to do this. File, that might be in the other one. Trying to remember if revert is in here or in Illustrator, but one thing that I know always works is the history panel. This is everything we've done since we opened the file, so a ton of different gradients. I'm just going to go back to new and refresh to a brand new sheet. And to make a custom gradient, from here we need to do a few things differently, and I'll show you that in the next movie.